Hello, welcome back for our little pod chats where it's a cross between a podcast and a chit chat. So today what I want to talk about is technology, and I feel like this is such a hot topic. Specifically what I want to talk about is technology and the effects that it has on a developing reader's brain. So in order to have this conversation, our starting point needs to be, when does our brain start to develop for reading? To have that, we need to rewind a bit further and have a conversation around the foundation for reading. So oral language is the foundation for reading. This has been proven time and time again through research that we acquire language and then we transfer that understanding of language to print. There are 5 components to oral language. We've got morphology, phonology, syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. 5 steps. But we've got 5 components to oral language. This becomes the foundation for reading. So when we are talking about the impact or effects of technology on a developing reader's brain, what we really are looking at is the impact and effect of technology on oral language development. So if we look at oral language development, there are 3 ways that we can develop this. We can develop it through talking, we can develop it through reading, and through taking our kids places. So when we are looking at the impacts, what people will usually latch onto as sort of a substitution is for talking, because it would be a natural assumption that if talking builds oral language, that it then gets transferred to reading, so it's part of building that reading brain. If talking is part of that, then why can't we have kids exposed to TV and videos in place of conversational volleys, which are those conversational turns back and forth? Here's why. So I want to break this down. So there are 3 primary reasons why, and then I want to go through some of the research behind it, and then some safer options, because technology is just part of our world at this point. So the thing that happens is it actually limits our brain development. So the reason for this is because when we are watching TV, when we're watching videos, when we're doing things like that and engaged in digital technology input, our brain goes into a very passive state. So when our kids, when our littles, birth to 5, when they are engaged with somebody and they're talking back and forth, or somebody's talking to them, their brain is incredibly engaged. Their neurons are firing and they're creating all of these connections inside of their brain related to learning. When we turn on the TV or videos, their brain goes into a very passive mode where it actually starts to limit their brain development, meaning those connections are not getting made at the same rate. The second reason is that it reduces overall attention. Now, when your child is watching TV or watching a video, you will see they're dialed in, but they're almost zoned out. It has to do with pixels and light and movement and all of these things related to what they're watching on the screen. And these are created to hold your child's attention. And your child's attention is absolutely held focused in on what they're watching because of the way that their brain is interacting with that. The problem is that over time, what it does is it reduces their capacity to have attention and give attention to something that is not that stimulating. So reading, learning, talking, engaging in conversation with real people, completing a task. This is why we're seeing this increase in ADHD diagnoses. This is why we're seeing kids in school that have a very hard time with their attention. This is why we see adults having dinner with friends and they can't get through an entire dinner without checking their phone, because we have actually reduced our brain's ability to focus and give attention. The third reason that TV and videos are not as impactful for developing oral language is because the language is different. So when we are talking with our children, when we're reading books, we are actually bringing in more complex language. We're using different vocabulary because we're referring to what we're doing. We're talking about what we're doing. We're talking about where we're going. We're talking about tasks and items around the house. And you're actually building your child's oral language in the areas of syntax and semantics and pragmatics. When we turn on the television or they're watching a video, that language is very, very different. It's primarily dialogue. It's characters talking back and forth. And dialogue or conversational language is very different. It's much more basic. It lacks complex sentence structure because most of the time conversational language is communicated in phrases. It also lacks vocabulary, so your children are not learning the same level of vocabulary as they would be if you're discussing what you're doing, what you're making for dinner, where you're going, that you're at the bank making a deposit, things like this. And so we've got three primary reasons. So limited brain development, reduced attention span, and then also lower language development because the type of language they're listening to is less complex. All right, so those are the reasons related to language development and building your child's reading brain and how technology is going to potentially interfere with that. So now let's talk about two other secondary reasons that, in my opinion, they're just as vital. It just doesn't have as much to do with language development. A 2018 study found that high screen time, so 2+ hours a day, and if you really look at how often your kids are on screens, it will shock you. It shocks me when I see how much I am on a screen. When we've got high screen time, there is an increase in anxiety and mood swings. So we've all seen this where we go to take away technology from our kids. It's time to shut it down, time to shut down the TV, shut down the tablet, shut down whatever. And they have a full-blown meltdown. It has to do with what's happening in their brain. Now, I already told you their brain goes into a passive mode. But here's what's interesting. It goes in a passive mode as it's related to learning and building connections and neurons firing. What it does do, though, is it goes into a hyper stimulation mode. So in order to keep your child calm, you're literally training your child's brain to need that level of stimulation. This is part of what goes on to affect their overall attention. But first, what we see is anxiety and mood swings. The other thing that we see are sleep disruptions. Now, this is also related to overstimulation. And I don't know about you, but I don't know a single parent who has ever said, my child sleeps too much. I really want to reduce the amount of sleep that they're getting. So in 2015, a study was conducted, and what they found is that screens reduce the production of melatonin. Melatonin is what our bodies produce naturally to help us sleep. It's what keeps us on a very regular sleep cycle where we're awake during the day and we're asleep at night. When we are on a screen, that production is disrupted, and as a natural consequence, our sleep is disrupted. So there we've got 5 reasons to make sure that we are being very careful about technology. So now let's talk about some safer options, because technology is part of our world. We're not getting away from it. And I am not for 1 second suggesting that you never put your child in front of a screen, because that's not realistic. But I do want to talk about some safer options. All right, one of my favorite is listening to a podcast or listening to a story. So you can do this in 2 ways. Obviously, kid-friendly podcasts. You can also go on YouTube and you can have a book read to your child. And yes, they're watching something, but it's literally the pages of a book turning. That's it. So it's going to be low stimulation and they're listening to a book at the same time. So podcasts or have books read on YouTube. If you are out and about and you are at a doctor's appointment, you are getting your tires rotated, you need them to just sit still quietly for a period of time, and all you have is your phone. Rather than downloading a bunch of games and letting them play games on your phone, open up your camera roll, let them scroll your camera roll. Or create an album in there that's of them and let them scroll through that. This entertains kids far more than we realize, for them to look through pictures of themselves, look at videos of themselves. All of their memories and all of the people that they love are going to be in those photos, and it is highly entertaining for them to do this. My third suggestion would be the times that you do need to turn on the television and put on a movie or a TV show. That's fine. I let my kids watch TV when they were younger. Technology is not the enemy. We just want to be really careful about how we are choosing digital options for our children. So if you are choosing a television show, choose one that has lower stimulation rates. So you want to think about sort of old school shows, old school cartoons for your kids, like Berenstain Bears, Winnie the Pooh, Franklin, all of these sort of older cartoons. They lack the movement and light that current and newer cartoons have. So it's lower stimulation, lower impacts on your child's brain development, and more benefit to you and your child. That's all for now. Drop your questions in the chat.